Welcome everyone back again for Awaken Your Inner Genius. Here we are on Unit 2, Lesson 7, and the first part for this evening is going to be focusing on the illumination of Walter Russell, a very, very big topic as we are studying and making our way through the home study course written by Walter and Leo Russell. We have our esteemed panel here with us today. We've got Karen Elkins, editor of Science and Sage. We have Ken Pearson, a 30-year student. We have Jim Porter, who has been a lifelong student and also lived with Leo and worked with Leo for a couple years, and John Bonzel, who is joining us in just a moment. We're having some tech difficulties. And myself, Kim Faith. So delighted to have you all here. As we begin here tonight, we're going to just become centered in this moment. There is never an accident when your path and our path crosses, whether it is live here tonight or if you are listening to this later. And so what we've been doing lately is having ocean sounds play while we just do a moment to become grounded. And I typically leave this image up because I want us all to think about this idea of the universal heartbeat. But today I was inspired for something greater, because we can see an ocean, we can sense an ocean, we can touch an ocean. And I was divinely inspired when I was preparing for the session for us to link not only what we can sense and touch and see, but that which was unseen. And as the meditation goes on, I wanted simply to have this image in your mind. It's going to tie into a story around what Walter talks about a little bit later on. And I wanted us to understand that the same concepts that are here in the earthly plane with that which is seen is also tied to that which is unseen. But I will still invite you to close your eyes. James will turn on the ocean sounds. And if you can just join us in some breathing, please. You can breathe in. And as you can breathe out, I'd like you to tune into the ocean sounds if you can hear those. Think about yourself standing there on a beach with the wind on your skin and the sun on your face. As you continue to breathe in deeply and to breathe out deeply. Allow the waves to carry you and tune in to that universal heartbeat. And as you are tuning in to this notion of the ocean, of what we'll be talking about here tonight with the three omnis that were revealed in Walter's illumination, we also want you to tune in cosmically to all that is unseen and unheard as you begin to intuitively understand the larger picture. Keep breathing deeply, please. Relax your hands. If you'll breathe in with me. And as you breathe out, I would like you to relax your neck and your shoulders. Relax your jawline. Give yourself the gift of this time, of where we're going to discuss and intuit and hear and have it just simply go deep inside as we have the lesson here this evening of a conversation here together. May we simply center in love and know that there's something powerful about to happen. When you are ready, feel free to open your eyes. And we want to say a gracious thank you for everyone to be here with us. I would like to go ahead and bring up something before we start, though, just a couple of things. We are giving you the itinerary of what we're doing. And so for right now, if you'll take a look at the screen, tonight we are in the special third edition of the home study course. We encourage you to get your own copy of the home study course. You'll see that in the link at the Awaken Your Inner Genius. Today, we're talking about Walter Russell's illumination. And then next Sunday, we'll be spending some time on the second part of the unit for Leo Russell's illumination. And then the last Sunday in July, we have a special treat. We'll be talking about lesson 8, Q&A from the home study course. But at that particular session, Jim, this will be special for you and John. We'll have Margaret Rue as a guest that evening.
Wonderful.
And so if you could just share with everybody briefly how you and Margaret and John knew each other way back then.
Well, John and I have been working at the university for, I'll say, several months or longer. when Margaret showed up. Sweet, quiet, soft-spoken little redhead girl, strawberry blonde, and she wanted to meet Mrs. Russell, and that began her work with Mrs. Russell. She was Mrs. Russell's personal companion after that, not immediately, but after that, and remained so until Mrs. Russell's death. As a matter of fact, Margaret was with her when she passed.
For 10 years, Margaret was with her. So that's going to be special to have her as a guest. I was excited about that. We do not have your partner with us tonight, Jim, but she is with us in heart and spirit. So,
and she's listening.
All right, she is listening. So as we start here today, I know this is a special part of the story, and I want to just offer some inspiration of the week and give you just a snapshot for those of you that are new to the story. And we wanted you to take a look here and wanted to bring up one of the quotes that Walter talks about a little bit later in the lesson. But if you'll take a look at just just a few of the pictures, what Walter Russell's life was about. And I wanted to read that quote. From that moment, I fully knew that God had a purpose for my living, to manifest him by a life of demonstrating the power of man who knew God in him and worked knowingly with him. And so we're going to talk more in detail about that, but I also wanted you to see just a sampling of some of the scientific posters, because this was a man who gives us an example of what this actually looked like. And this isn't even, I mean, the beginning. It's just simply not even a thimbleful of what it is that we're about. But as we go into lesson 7, I'm going to ask Ken to end up reading a quote that we're getting ready to put on the screen, because I felt this was a really important place as we go into the next two images there on the screen. As we begin lesson 7, this next quote was a really powerful one. Ken, would you do us the honor?
Yes, and now the time has come when I shall try to tell you of the greatest thing that can happen to any man in all the world. The illumination into God light of cosmic consciousness, the ultimate goal of all unfolding mankind and womankind.
There you go. So, John, we have you with us? All right, he's working on it. So let's go in, and that's the very first page. It comes from the very first page of this particular lesson. And I wanted to go ahead and ask us to dive into this next one. James, if you'll stay with Mr. Maynard's picture, please, before we go to the home study course. And I wanted to start here. And Jim, as we're waiting for John with technical difficulties, I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit. The quote there says, Mr. Maynard lived in the dark, but walked and talked with God in the light. What does that mean? And this is on page 100 of the home study course.
If memory serves me right, I believe Mr. Maynard was blind. I don't know whether it was from birth or not, but so often when we start to make great leaps forward in an individual lifetime, we have other souls that come in ahead of us to help us along the way. Mr. Maynard, I believe, was a mentor that had agreed with him prior to his incarnation to come here and be there to help him adjust to what he was going through. They'll tell you themselves, you'll come across in the writings, Russell say that if you don't know what it is that just happened to you when you have that flash, it can be terrifying. It can be, you can be mistaken as someone that needs to be put in a mental institution as you try to explain it to the people around you. So Mr. Maynard at that point in his life was a godsend, and probably literally so.
Well, and Ken, I know this is actually one of your favorite images. We first met when you had the idea of doing a movie about Walter Russell, and you love this scene. And why did this scene speak to you so?
You know, for me, it was exactly what Walter said. You know, he was the inspiration of how to walk and talk with God as a living God, as opposed to just a praying God of the morning and the evening. So, you know, Mr. Maynard also could play the piano and hear any piece of music and play it immediately, which he ended up showing Walter a lot of stuff after 3 years old. Walter was playing it with one finger. And then once he got around Mr. Maynard around 3 years old, he ended up playing with both hands. And Mr. Maynard was the key to music, which was very inspirational for Walter's younger life, listening to Mozart and Bach and Chopin as a young man, and being introduced to those great geniuses at an early age. I think Mr. Maynard was a lot more key than people give give him a credit for. Walter certainly seems to. Mr. Russell certainly seemed to give him a lot of credit, as saying he was the greatest man to me of all time.
Very, very powerful. So why don't we before we go into the home study course, so James, if we'll have that ready, Jim, if you would describe to everybody we're going to be talking about a number of Walter Russell's illuminations throughout this, and this, for someone who's never heard about it before, could rather be intimidated by this idea. So do you mind starting with the concept of what is an illumination, so that way when they're listening tonight, they recognize that this is something that's actually all of our divine birthright at some point in our journey as a soul.
Right. It's a flash that takes place between, the physical reaction is a flash that takes place between both lobes of the brain. Most of us go through many incarnations with our left brain and our right brain not being in absolute attunement with each other. One dominates the other, becomes subjective. And when that happens, you can't know the divine, you can only sense life. You're limited to knowing. But as you approach the first stage from pagan man, the next stage would be genius. As you move into the stage of genius, you begin to develop your ability to get both lobes of the frontal brain to coexist, even if it's just for moments and passing. And you begin to hear the voice of God knowingly from within. And you're inspired by that voice. You have to do something. That's what makes a genius a genius. They have to give what they know to humanity, and they rarely, unless they're a writer, can give it, or a poet can give it to humanity in words. So they give it to them in acts and inventions and things of that nature by doing what we would call superhuman things. But keeping in mind that following the the genius stage comes that illumination. And that's when you're both inner lobes of the brain literally unite as one, voiding each other out. That causes a short circuit in the brain, and you go out of body and become universal you. And I haven't experienced that, but I have been out of body in a near-death situation at one with the universal one. So in that sense, I have an inkling of what they must go through with that. But it is fair and right to say that what Leo and Doctor gave this course and these studies for us to point out that this is the path for all of us.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
You look, if you drive down the street and see somebody you don't think is worth, rolling down your window and giving them the time of day, that person is on their road to illumination, and in some cases might be further along than you are.
All right, that's a great way to think about that, John. So, Jim, too many J's. I have all these J's here on this session. I feel like my grandmother who goes through the whole list of names people. So, Karen, you have a gift for us at the end of the program before we go into Q&A, as you've done the visual. So I just wanted to ask you just a moment for you personally, before we get into any of the deepness of what happens here with the illumination. How were you inspired as you studied this particular lesson of the home study course?
In working on the video part that I was working on, there's certain aspects that were made more interesting, because you and I are speaking on the holographic nature of the universe, and the pendulum that swings, when I was looking at it, created a triangle, which created the prism of light. So Walter Russell, we're always talking about light, that we're a light being. And so it's always the swing of the pendulum. It's always light. It's always going from life to death, to male to female, to yin and yang. And so it was just interesting that when those sync up, I think about, Jim, when you were talking, what came to my mind was the chakras. And when all of those, when he goes talking about going through some of his illuminations, is going through all of these different layers of light. So it's almost as though your whole body sparks up, and then at the crown, you actually become illuminated. And for some people who have that, they call it the Kundalini awakening, and it's intense for some people. So, and most people can't relate to it. So that's what comes to my mind, Kimberly.
All right, so you were inspired as you were doing all of this work, because I watched as you were inspired this week. And so, Ken, I wanted to ask you to take us over here to page 101. You had a few things that we'll pull that up on the screen, but you had a few things you wanted to bring up here on page 101, because this is a rather huge story.
Well, we just talked about Mr. Maynard, and so I'd go to the second paragraph on 100 there. 101, I'm sorry, you said 101.
101.
The first paragraph there was... we got that. I remember as though it was about a minute ago, the effect of that tremendous transition. And this is where it's not about the brain as the consciousness to me. Tremendous transition into another world so utterly unlike the one in which my body dwelled and breathed in and out so strangely and unnecessarily. When I began to realize the world of many things, I felt myself to be that world of many things. All one, and I, the universe, the tree, the sky, a little ant at my thumb, and the great oak above me. An indescribable ecstasy pervaded me like an unborn vibration of the great silence from the vibrations of sound rhythms will be born. An ecstasy which I was to know again and again for 10,000 times, 10,000 times when I walked and talked with God in my world all through my long, long life of working only with him from that very day. So to me, this is all about, in that context, I had this sort of illumination when I read The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe after about 6 weeks. And I experienced exactly what he's talking about here, 10,000 times 10,000 lifetimes. What I saw was what I thought was every human being's face on the planet in a timeless moment. And then the eyes and within the eyes of each human being was that centering light, was that God light. After my experience for 30 days, I could see that God light in every human being that I came across for 30 days. And it ended after 30 days. But the oneness of everything and realizing that, again, I come back to saying, if you just think about even what you're doing right now, how you fit, if you look around the room that you're in and your environment you're in, how does all that fit into your eyeball? We never think about that. If it wasn't light, it wouldn't fit. If it was actually, so there's no reality in matter. Therefore, the left and the right brain are nothing but recording mechanisms. And the seat of consciousness is that what divides the left from the right is where that seat of consciousness lies. And therefore, when we can separate, when that seat of consciousness is separated from the left and right lobe of the brain, that's when we're in that Brahmic bliss, that state of euphoria where you become one with everything and everybody, to me.
Well, go ahead.
Nope, that's fine.
Well, and I think that's why that's that particular paragraph. So did studying the home study course give you a greater understanding of what it is that you went through in Illumination? And I'll also ask Jim the same thing, so that it wasn't a scary experience.
No, it was euphoric from the moment that it happened. I had tears of joy just streaming down my face during that. I can't even tell you how long I was in that state. But it was quite a while. I would say maybe an hour or two for sure. It was one of my longest meditations I can recall in terms of just being in that zero stillness. And meditation to me today from the home study course is about quieting that left and right brain down and then just going to that centering place where there is no motion, there is no thoughts.
All right, Jim, what about you? Did it help when you were studying the Walter Russell material to understand what had happened to you? And I'm asking these questions because I feel that many people are searching for different experiences that are happening to them. And I know for me, it gave me voice for some of the things that I had experienced in my life.
Literally, it made discovering these works clarified what an experience was for a 5-year-old child. Let me briefly state it this way. When I was born into the world, I was in communion with some presence all my childhood until the age of 4. And at that point, we separated. I lost it. But that communion became familiar to me when I drowned in a pond and I'm down at the bottom looking at the sun on the water, still in body, but went out of body, and it was with the universal presence. When every mystic that's ever experienced anything far beyond me has tried to explain in words what that presence is. It is what the Russells say. It is universal. You're not here or there. You're universally present as one with it. Yet I had the experience of at the same time being able to be embodied, sense being embodied at the bottom of the water. So it was a dual experience for me, but it only lasted a few minutes. So it was life-changing. And like everyone else, at first, I began to try to tell everybody around me what I experienced. They didn't want to hear it. And, shush, shush. And I've told people before the story about me being in church with my mom. And the preacher that day was doing the hellfire and brimstone, and God's going to send you to hell and stuff.
Right.
And I'm sitting tugging on her, saying, that's not God. That's not God. And of course, I got quieted down.
Sure.
But
I'm sure you did. Probably sat in the back pew of the church, Jim.
Yeah. And not until I discovered these lessons in my early 20s did I finally have someone that could speak the language that I knew there, but
Yes.
had nobody I could share it with.
Yes, I'm with you completely. John, do we have you?
You got me.
All right, John. So that's called tenacity. We're glad to have you here with us. And so why don't you, if you would, before we dive into it, because we're going to be over here on page 101, and I'm going to scroll to something at the bottom of 101 in just a moment, but want to just ask if you would to share with everybody about the importance of what we're going to learn here tonight about Walter's illumination.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I don't know, and of course I'm not the best read individual, but I don't know of anywhere else, maybe in the Vatican, of where there's a written record of someone having a grand illumination and spending 39 days and nights with the Creator and re-entering their body to tell the story. So this story of Dr. Russell's illumination, I believe, is the only one of its kind in the detail that Walter Russell gives us. I mean, people had a flash and this and that, and in that flash of light, you have to wait until whatever is in that flash comes to you. But with Walter Russell, it was almost like a second by second download. And for him to be able to retrieve that in totality is a miracle in itself.
Well, and when you have had flashes yourself, did this work help explain what was happening to you, or did you already know it as you came into this?
No, having read about this, I've had some flashes, but I don't think I was allowed past the first gate.
All right.
Because my golf game wasn't that good yet, so God said you're going to have to go back and
we're going to have to try it again. Too funny.
It's gotten better. Let's say that. He's got a good game now. I'll say that much.
All right. So I'm going to ask James to pull up. And if you would go down to the bottom of 101, and I want to say welcome to everybody. Hello, Karen, Jean, and Susan. So glad to have you all. I want you to notice where I underlined in purple. And this was something that Walter kept talking about, that Mr. Maynard understand. And Walter kept talking about, I have been in my world, glorious happenings in my world. And he capitalizes my and world multiple times when he talks about this world that he was in as a child, that he said to other people were not. And I wanted to make sure I brought that up to everybody and not to blow past that, because the capitalization of words and phrases seem to have great importance. Is that fair, Jim?
That is very fair.
And so if you scroll down to the top of page 102, James, this is where we were talking about Mr. Maynard earlier, and in the yellow brackets there, it says, my blind maestro, you were right, Jim, was the only friend of my early days who dwelt with me in my world and I in his. Mm-hmm. And so that's incredibly powerful. And so, John, if I could, as we scroll down to that next paragraph, we're not going to read everything in this, but I do want to bring up the fact that Walter Russell experienced some kind of a mini illumination every 7 years. Could you give the audience a snapshot of that, please?
Yes, and what's interesting is that they all occurred on his birthday, which is pretty amazing. And so every 7 years, the Creator gave Dr. Russell a little more knowledge each time, kind of building him up. And then May 19th, 1921, the grand illumination took place and lasted 39 days and nights. And so, we don't know how the Creator works, but we've often joked as a group that there's my time, your time, and then there's God's timing. And we just don't know when that's going to be. But obviously, it was Walter's time. and But the story gets even better. But yeah, so it was kind of a build up and a preparation for the big one, I think, and preparing his body to receive that intensity as well.
Yes. Yes, and that's what we're working towards. And I'm going to ask Ken to comment. So when we go here to the bottom of page 102, Ken, I wanted to read this, and I have you comment because you related to this part of the story. I'm going to go down to the paragraph that said, I had long since been, okay, so right there, I had long since been taken out of school and put to work. God would not let me read books. He became my teacher and closed the books which I would open. Things said in them were so unlike the nature of things in my world, all caps again, that he guarded me against their intrusion to blur the clarity of things I visioned in the light. And so, Ken, I just wanted to ask you to comment, because you have said before that you almost think that's a bit of a blessing, that when people don't have that exposure to all the books and the schooling and some of the way that we're programmed here in this reality.
Yeah, kind of a blessing and a curse, if you will. Until you have the kind of insight, intersensory perception, which you're going to hear Mr. Russell talk about, his intersensory perception, his ability had already started at 7. So, as we move forward in that, but, in terms of that, when I grew up, I have a 7th grade education. I thought I was at a disadvantage for a long time in life until I did get to this message, quite frankly. And then I realized it was a blessing and that God had been preparing me as a messenger to carry a message to many, many people for many years, which just unfolded in my life. It was not something I thought out. And, I lectured for quite a period of time in front of a lot of people and was followed and still followed and followed by a lot of people as a gift. It was certainly not me. And it was because of that lack of education that I was able to read this knowledge and truly absorb it. But it also taught me how to read. When you read like any one of the Russell's books, it will teach you how to read. If you read the Divine Iliad, you can go from that right to Shakespeare, quite frankly, because it's that kind of vocabulary. It may seem difficult, and that's why we keep saying to everybody, don't let the science distract you. I know a lot of people might get a little feel like, oh, science. You're thinking academic science. This is natural law of science, and natural law means nature. So when you can relate it to nature, that's very powerful. Something, for instance, that came to me years ago was, the reality is that we mostly only see half the world. If you think about it, like a tree, for instance, right? I always looked at trees and I thought they were gorgeous and beautiful and could relate to them, but I never realized that below the ground was a tree equal and proportionate to the tree above the ground. That came from the home study course of see the whole tree. Don't see half the tree. We only see half the world and try and see the whole world. So this was relating to that, academic education can definitely get in the way. There's no question about it. I mean,
and that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I've heard you speak about that before. And so anyone who's listening to this, we are in a world that teaches us that you are not smart unless you follow through the academic. I know I went through that as well, being that I did not have a master's and a PhD. I've learned that really the more educated you are, the more out of touch many are in connection to their divinity. So I'm not saying that's everybody, but I am saying that our education of what's important is something greater here. And that's what I just wanted to make sure that we landed, because I think that's something that Walter Russell does really well here. So Jim, if you would take us to page 103, and if you can either read what's on 103 or you can just bring up here when we're talking about what happened in his 14th year. Would you like me to read a little bit of it, or would you like to? What's your preference, Jim?
I can read it.
All right. Scroll down a little bit, James, please, because this is
Then
now his second illumination.
Then in my 14th year came the second great illumination at a time when my body had been declared dead by the doctors and undertakers were arriving. Black diphtheria. Let me stop a moment and point out here, this is in 1876 or 77. So for the undertakers to show up at a rural home took some time. So we're going to assume that he was gone for a while. Black diphtheria had seemingly destroyed my throat and shut off my breathing. Then again came the great light, which had come to me in my first illumining, and I arose from the bed to the great amazement of my weeping parents and to the doctors, who found that my throat functioned as properly as though it were perfectly healed. Now I'm going to stop here for a second, because this is something that has intrigued me forever. Because I had a short near death, I'm a big fan and reader of short near death experiences. But what happened here was not a near death experience. And it's my opinion that what happened here was a resurrection, because I've read hundreds of near death experiences. And if the person comes back into the body after being going for a period of time, whatever injuries or illness was in that body is in it when they return to it, and they have to go through the healing process. Dr. Russell awoke fully healed. Black diphtheria literally eats your throat and lungs out. So for him to arise not only from being declared dead, but to arise perfectly healed, to me, that's more on the level of Nazareth. Not Nazareth.
Lazarus.
Lazarus. Thank you, Lazarus. Because he was devastated and had been in the grave for 3 days. And when he arose, he was fully functional and healed. So that's why I refer to that as a resurrection, not a near-death experience.
Can I ask you a question, Jim, on that note real quick, if you don't mind? I understood he regressed once his parents didn't believe that he could be alive, and the doctor, that he started regressing a little bit. I'd never heard that, but it didn't relate to me that he regressed. Maybe it was John who told me that.
I don't recall reading that. That'd be interesting to read. But as you move back into body,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As you move back into body, you begin living life again. Leo was always kind enough, and you'll hear me say this throughout the course, to point out to John and I that an illuminate has incredible knowledge of the workings of the universe, and in essence can do incredible things, but generally choose not to. But so when he came back to body, the people around him, remember he was 14, were saying to him, "Oh, this can't be true. You're sick. You're ill." It could have interfered with his immediate thinking. The end result was, though, that the cure took place and helped. And that for me is why I look at it as a resurrection, which is important, because when you're talking about an illumination on the scale that he had, a resurrection is absolutely doable and possible, and it's spontaneous healing.
Well, but I think it's what's important is for everybody who's listening to this to understand that there are lots of people that are not going to understand if you have inspiration like that. If you have a flash of illumination, we're moving towards the point where Walter had a 39-day illumination. So this is pretty extreme. But everybody, I think it's important for us to recognize, and it could John, I'm going to ask you to give some insight to people as they begin to have any kind of flashes of inspiration, illumination on their own. How do they handle when others around them don't understand it? And then we'll be taking our first break after you answer that one. John, can you hear us? Okay, John, obviously we lost John. So Ken, if you could just quickly comment on that. What do we say to people who have a flash of inspiration, perhaps like you did, illumination, and people around you have no ability to understand what's even happened with you?
I think there's some people that can grasp it and relate to it. And then I think there are certain people that just feel overwhelmed, but there's that non-communication, verbal communication that goes on to me in that kind of state. I would love to imagine, and I would love to look in Walter's eyes, because I would bank to see that, as Glenn Clark wrote, there was a look in his eyes of a mystic, of somebody very special and of deep, deep purpose, and that radiated. And I think that's the same thing with what you're talking about now. I saw people freak out. I did see people, when I was in that state, literally get uncomfortable around me because of the way I was able to. I just felt like I was looking in their eyes, and I could see that God light. And some people got very uncomfortable with it, and others really embraced it.
So, Karen, I know that part of our passion for why we're doing this particular broadcast of Awaken Your Inner Genius is to help people help demystify some of this and have people begin to be open up to more of these kinds of things. Any final thought before we take our first break about not being fearful of this kind of inspiration?
The thing that comes to me for a lot of people, having done so many different issues of the magazine, many people who take plant medicines around the world have an illumination based on seeing life as fractals and everything is light. And so when you are able to sort of transcend and cross over in certain ways, or some people do mushrooms. I've never done any of them, but that's okay. I mean, a lot of people tell me they see the fractal nature, which is just light. When you look at Walter Russell's work, it has to do with the prism, and it has to do the unfolding of light coming through and how it circulates and creates reality. So when you actually enter the science and the natural sciences, which I love about Walter Russell's work, my question as a kid is, how does God create? And he drove me here to show me. And this is for me and a very powerful lesson and learning. So, and every time I step in every week, it's like the little more ahas add in. So I'm always very appreciative of that. So
okay. Well, believe it or not, it's already time for our first break. So what we've been doing with these broadcasts, because we do 90 minutes of a program, then we will show Karen's visual journey that she gifts to us, and then we come back for Q&A. So be right back. This is a big concept. So I'm going to be moving ahead to page 105 when we come back. But let's go ahead and take our first 3-minute break. Use it as a bio break, stand up, get some oxygen, or simply meditate to the music. We'll see you in 3. All right, we're down to 10 seconds. If you can hear my voice, if you'll begin to lovingly and gently find your way back. Good evening, Rebecca. Good evening, Samantha, and good to see you, Deb. All right. Ken will be coming back on screen in just a moment, and we'll have all of our folks back. These 3 minutes go by so quickly, so unbelievably quickly. And so I wanted to come on for just a moment as we continue this, and it was a big challenge. I'm gonna mention this to you when the quote goes away here, that this was a bit intimidating. I've been trying to help facilitate this group, and we spend a great deal of time each week going through, highlighting things. And I want to mention to everybody that there is so much to cover in this lesson. Would you all agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to be really clear, and it was really a struggle. James, if we'll go ahead and bring John off screen, please. Thank you. It was really a struggle as we were planning what we should do for this. And so please know that, and have faith, pun intended, that you will take away exactly what you need to take away for your soul's journey at this moment. So we'd like you to relax into the experience, because as we're going into this next, the rest of this, I want to be sure, and I'm going to move us so we're sure we get to the 39-day illumination, which is the hallmark of Walter Russell's work. But I do want to just point out the top of page 105, and I'm going to read this briefly to you. And he started to talk about, after we'll kind of at the end of our session, we'll talk a little bit more about the divine Iliad. But I want to go to this brackets here when it's saying, he was speaking about some of what he revealed in what was revealed to him in his illumination. And he said, a simple example of the normal action of this principle is the inbreathing of oxygen, which multiplies life, and its reversal to death-giving carbon dioxide when one breathes out. And he goes on to talk about how this was actually explained and amplified in his 1921 illumination. And so, Karen, I wanted to ask you to just briefly comment, because the science behind what was revealed in his illumination is part of what inspired you, and you talked about this in-breath and the out-breath.
It was interesting. So when I looked at the fulcrum and the pyramid, and it swings back and forth, then you realize there's life and death. And there's in and there's out, and there's the breath and there's the breath. But what gives us life is actually the spirit, the oxygen, which we get when we come to. And so it was interesting just to see the spectrum. And when you see the video thing that I did, you'll actually understand it much more deeply, because I actually make it move. So it was, yeah, and it's a prism, so it's all those things. So thank you.
Okay, so part of why we start with this, with the meditation, as brief as it is, and have you go back to the breath, is if you can go back to the breath and understand that the in-breath and the out-breath really is an example. And John, I'm going to ask you to comment on that before I go over here to page 106. The in-breath and the out-breath really is an example of what the Creator's process is about, is it not?
Yes, it's the universal heartbeat. Compression, expansion. That's it. And then everything after that are complexities and multiplications and so on. So we keep it simple, right? So if someone can understand a heartbeat, and if someone can understand a breath, then they made it. So we'll conclude our broadcast this evening
and be done with it.
And that's science, baby. That's the science we're talking about right there.
Well, in all fairness, though, I know we're keeping it simple, but in all fairness, we as human beings blow right past the most obvious part of our connection to our divinity through the in-breath and the out-breath, do we not?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't conclude that myself. However,
oh, come on. Keep talking, John. Tell me more.
Well, I don't know exactly what you're saying there personally. That we blow right by the universal.
I'm saying the average individual doesn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about the fact that their in-breath and out-breath is a miracle of the divine.
That is correct. That is correct. And they probably have never also associated that while they're in sleep mode, they're always connected to creative, never separate, never apart. So, they call it the sinoatrial node, which connects the brain to the heart. And that's also what's connected to source. So.
Well, and I bring that up because that's part of why they started the home study course in meditation, is to have you grounded and get centered in your breath. So for most of us, we have blown past that, not even realizing the miracle that it is. And so I want to bring attention to Bonnie's comment. Bonnie says, I would like to think that these teachings would be so simple that a child could grasp some of the concepts. So it's simple and complex all in the same way. Would you say so, Jim?
It's complex for those that want to look at it as complex. It is truly simple. It is the inward and outward breath is another way where the Russells say give and re-give. That there's no taking in nature. There's no taking in life. There's only give and re-give. So when you breathe, we'll do the simple one we learned in science class as kids. We breathe in oxygen. We give out carbon monoxide. Trees bring in, plants and living things bring in, breathe in carbon monoxide. They give us back oxygen. That's give, re-give. It's the beauty of the system of nature. Nothing is lost in the process. And when you can focus on your breath and hold it in meditation with ease and reach that state where you step out, I'm not talking totally out of body. You simply step out and you have a sense of oneness. When you can just learn to do something that simple, your breath becomes a real thing to you. Mm-hmm. I sit in the mornings and I look at the breaths of nature going on all around me. Mm-hmm. Things swaying in the breeze, clouds floating in the air. These are all compression, expansion cycles. And I defy anybody to go into nature, spend a few hours there and show me one thing that is not
yes.
a breath cycle.
Well, that's what the work did for me. It was an awakening of something I knew deep down always. I've always known this connection to nature, but to see it put into the work and the way that it was, and you begin to understand the scientific principles as it's married with philosophy, which we'll be talking about what Leo brought to it at the next session, is the fact that you begin to walk through the world with a magical existence because you see the miracles of the Creator all around you.
My advice to all people would be that when you find this work difficult, stop. Go between the lines, as they suggest. Sit quietly and commune with Creator. You have a direct contact. It's yours. Commune with Creator and send forth the desires that you want. And I'll end that by saying, break the habit of living on negatives. I can't meditate. I can't this. I will. I am. And start a whole new cycle in your mind. You are a co-creator with the designer of the entire universe.
Wow.
Take on
pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. Okay, so I'm going to ask my fellow team here. I'm going to go ahead and move quickly through 106 and 107 because I want to bring to our attention what his premonition of what Leo, his knowing of what Leo coming into his life is going to be the middle of 106, where I've got the blue marks there, James. Thank you. And then I'm going to quickly go through 107 because I want to move us over to the grand illumination. And so he was talking about, so complete was my intersensory perception that I was as much aware of Leo's birth as I am aware of the coming birth of another planet in this solar system. All right, so can we just stop right there? That is a loaded sentence. Loaded sentence. Okay. I know that it will seem incredible and unbelievable, but I was so aware of her growth and purpose that I felt certain that she would come to fulfill our mutual destiny before the day given to me is May 19th, 1946. Before it arrived, which was to begin our mutual activity, and reversing the thinking of the human race from its greed and fear basis to the love basis of nature. And so I want to go over here. Go ahead and skip ahead, if you would, James, to 107. And I'm going to make some personal comments in just a moment. And I think we lost Ken, our partner here. But and it says, the story is incredible only to those whose limitations are outer sensing. To anyone whose inner sensory perception has unfolded to the great spectrum range, which is given to all illuminates, this story is perfectly comprehensible and natural. I look forward to the day when I may find time to write this cosmic romance to inspire others to deeper comprehension of the multiplication power which results from a male-female unity and equality. So the only thing I'm going to bring up here, I'm actually speaking at the University of Science and Philosophy in August. We'll share with you all the date, and we're going to encourage you to tune in. I would not have believed this if I have not experienced some elements of this myself. So I will not go into that on this particular broadcast, but he was talking about how he knew she was coming in his life. So they were talking about how they had connections before they ever met. And so the next broadcast, we're going to be talking about Leo's illumination, But I'm going to ask Jim and John if you would just comment on anything you want them to know about Walter and Leo before we get into Walter's illumination, based on these 2 pages. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
You want to run with that, John, or I can jump in?
I think John is still having problems. Technical is not working for us tonight. So go ahead, Jim.
Having had the privilege of living and working with her and seeing her almost on a daily basis, it was fascinating because whenever his name would be mentioned in word and sentence and reading, she would light up. She would just light up. And you're talking about a light being to start with. And she would just glow with the unbelievable love she had for this wonderful, soulmate of hers. And so I didn't get to experience that in his eyes. You will experience it very much in this particular lesson in his words.
Yes.
He points out how they were literally one, that they knew of each other's presence from the time of her birth, that she was his equal. People, please take the time to see that. She was his equal, illumined partner.
Yes.
And together they accomplished far more with this message than either one of them would have accomplished alone. That's why God gave them to us in the manner that he did. So I can't give it enough praise.
I wanted to bring that up too, because they talk about how when they actually talked on the phone in March of 1946, he immediately recognized her voice and her presence. So that was a very powerful moment. I'm going to share more about that a little bit later, because I had a moment also like that where it was a divine cosmic meeting. So, okay. So I want to move on to, let's talk about the main illumination. So let's see, the best way to move to, let's go ahead and move to 109. Okay. So 109, let's go down here, because this is, like I said, huge. If you'll go down and see it, keep going, James. All right, stop right there. So when it talked about the illumination into cosmic consciousness is an entirely spiritual experience and is the ultimate goal of all mankind, which completes the unfolding of the man idea on earth. And all down through man's unfolding, it comes gradually to all people. That's what we started our session with tonight. Every inspiring thought which comes to you is a partial illumination. So let's capture that. Every inspiring thought which comes to you is a partial illumination. The geniuses of the world are those who have had the greatest number of spiritual inspirations. Every such inspiration is also a partial illumination, and each illumination is further unfolding of inner sensory perception and inner hearing. Talk about powerful. And so as we continue through here, and we're setting this up for what happened, and through his illumination here, what does anybody on the panel want to say about this, about as we're moving towards the big story of what happened in 1921, about every inspiring thought which comes to you as a partial illumination?
I could add something to that I think would be helpful. I believe that we all experience perfection, and it happens in the in-between moments. And what I define that as is that any moment that we are exceedingly content and fulfilled, we are experiencing ecstasy, which is perfection, right? Where nothing else is necessary other than what is in that moment. So many of us, and I just want to preface this with, this sounds so intimidating. As a 30-year student, I read this in Walter's work, and when you look at the vastness of Walter and Leo's body of work and what they've done, I don't care who you are, it's still very inspiring. And then you just, there's a part of me personally that feels like I just don't see how I could do this. Yet I'm being told time and time and time again through this home study course that I can, that we can, that you can, that we all can. And in fact, we are all heading that way. So this is those perfect moments, I think, that they're talking about.
Well, and this all ties in to the awakening of humanity. So I appreciate what Deb says in there. She says, I am is a most powerful manifestation statement. Dee, you have no idea how important that is. Whenever Ken and I are talking, if he ever says a phrase about I am, and it's in a negative fashion, I'm like, be careful, you are putting this into motion. So we appreciate that. John, are you with us? Okay, so we had a plan tonight. We had a plan on a couple of things. So John was actually going to be dressed up as Walter and come on here and actually reveal the illumination that starts here on page 1012. Well, he couldn't get all the goatee and the things to work with him. So now we're having technical issues. So here's what we're going to do. Jim, I'm going to ask you, if you would, if you'll just read that first sentence on the first paragraph on page 112. I'll have James bring it up because this is where we're entering in. I want to go into the scene now. We're moving forward to 1921. Okay, 1921, and this is where we're starting to move into that whole illumination. And so what happened, Jim, over there on page 112?
My personal reaction to this great happening left me wholly mind with but slight awareness of my electric body. During practically all of the time, I felt that my body was not a part of me, but attached to my consciousness by electric flux threads of light.
All right, let me stop there. Let me stop there, Jim, because I think that electric flux, for anybody who's a student who has your home study course, we really want you to star that. I'm going to ask James to bring up the God is Light poster. This electric flux threads of light is something I've seen for my entire life. I've seen it between people, and this is part of what stopped me in my tracks when I came into the Russell Museum. And so if James will pull up that particular poster, it's the black poster with the black boxes. And the reason I'm stopping you there, Jim, because I don't want to blow past this, but attached to my consciousness by electric flux threads of light, I've actually seen those. And his illustration, James, if you'll come off mute, his illustration is actually what brings that up. James is working on it right now. And it shows the connection between one and the other. And so, John, you actually selected, John, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
All right. So the poster, the drawing that James is getting ready to bring up before we continue this, I want everyone to have this visual because it's very important. You actually chose to have this as the entry into the science room. And I'm talking about the fluxes of light over there on the bottom left. But can you explain why this was the selection for the first entry into the science room?
Yes. I believe it was maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, I told the story of entering Leo's bedroom.
You did?
So anyway, you know, when we say that Dr. Russell and Leo Russell were both 360-degree cosmic conscious illuminates, what that means is that their inner vision had been enhanced, that they see the full spectrum of all light. And so the reason that I chose this chart, because if you look in the top right-hand corner, just imagine those colors going all the way around, all 360 degrees. And so within those light spectrums, those light bands, is knowledge. People never associate that of what's there. So,
okay.
So that. And the other reason for having this, the first thing that you walk into the museum and the science, was the title up above. And I think it's so appropriate to the time.
The science of the future is based upon God, the creator. God is light, God is mind. Yes.
That's it.
All right, before we get rid of that, I don't want to get rid of it yet, and I'm going to go back to Jim to reading this. I really would like to bring everyone's attention to the bottom two left hand, on the bottom left, two boxes. You're going to see the light, the fluxes of light there in that first bottom box to the left, and then the one next to it, you'll see the fluxes of light between people. Like I'd mentioned, I have seen this since I was a child. I never understood why other people could not see it. So I've always known that we were connected to each other and to the divine with these threads of light. And so when he talks about these flux threads of light, we're going to zoom in here so you can see that a little bit clearer. I really wanted to hone in. You can order this at philosophy.org, the regular website, but zoom in just a little bit more, James, because to me, that bottom left-hand corner was when I knew I had walked into something that was so incredibly special that I had seen nowhere else. And I have traveled all over the world. And Karen, I know you've also had a lot of exposure to different belief systems, and you understand the way people talk about these things as well, correct?
Yeah, and when you look at the one, especially on the left, it is the weaving. It is those dendrites. Not even as it's electric body. It is the universe. It is the universe that lives within, even inside your own head with the dendrites. So it's the flux patterns that actually connect, that pulse and bring light and life. So
and zoom in a little bit more, James, because I want you all to notice how this was very purposeful on Walter Russell's drawing here, because on that far left, right there, notice how the lines on the left are not completely solid. Do you all notice that? That's I've studied this intensely, and the lines are not completely solid. They're almost light lines. Do you see what I'm talking about? Because fluxes of thread are not exactly solid. Whereas if you go to the right, you begin to see a little bit more of this solid part of it. So what I want to encourage everyone is, through this home study course and anything you see that comes from the Russell work, there is so much depth in everything. Is that a fair way to say it, Jim?
Sure.
You know, I want to add to that there, Miss Kimberly, real quick. On the right there is a representation, is everything is becoming every other, trying to become every other thing, not just human beings. That's a flux connecting everything to every other thing. So that's what John Bonzo talks about when he's talking about everything is trying to become every other thing. And that's a beautiful image. Also, I wanted to say on the left there, is that not that Mandela? What's that, a symbol? That
flower of life.
What's the flower, Karen?
The flower of life.
She's right. And it does weave. The flower of life is the geometric shapes that literally spin. If you look at the square, is John talks about, you've got the square, but inside, when the square spins, it becomes basically the circle. And all of these points of light weave together, which weave our reality. So everything is part of one and whole of the same, because it's all light. It's just a different layers. Like if people look at Jerry Pollock's work with layers of light, when you turn them and move them, they become different things. They become different facets. So you can become a cat or a dog or this, that. Everything else is always moving and geometrically becoming every other thing.
All right. So
one little thing on the left-hand side there I wanted to say is, Walter talked about light is a corpuscle and a wave.
Well, you can see the particle in the wave, and everything is rearranging and arranging. It's forever, ever, ever.
All right, so I don't want to lose everybody. So everybody, let us know how you're doing on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being I'm not getting it, and 10 being I am so excited I can hardly stand it. Kim, you all must keep going for hours. I want to know where you are on a scale of 1 to 10, if you'll place it in the chat box there, because this is pretty exciting stuff when you really begin to think about this whole notion of the awakening of humanity. So Jim, I'm going to come back to you while we have everybody else commenting. If you'll keep reading of the rest of that first paragraph, and then I'm going to ask John to skip on down. I'll tell him which paragraph to read. If you'll go after the electric flux threads of light, because that's pretty big.
When I had to use it in such acts as writing in words the essence of God's message, it was extremely difficult to bring my body back under control of my consciousness and make it do as I ordered it to do.
All right. So if you would, James, scroll down to that next page, 113. And what is this, John, that we're seeing, the scribble? It literally looks like scribble. What is this?
Well, this is Dr. Russell struggling to get to communicate with his body and to write down what he was receiving. And he explains how difficult this was. But as you read later on, or as we will read later on, you'll find out that Dr. Russell, then he says he was able to write this in a manner in which he had never done before in his life. And it was beautiful writing and so on. But yeah, so so that goes to show you, to me, it's just amazing. And try to think what's going through his head as this is happening, right?
Right.
He's over there having a conversation with the big guy, and he's saying, Walter, you got this? And he's like, well, I'm scribbling it at the moment. Can you give me a couple minutes here?
Slow it down, baby. Slow it down.
Yeah, can you just slow it down a minute?
Well, and I want to be sure to bring this back to where many of us, I know Karen often gets in the flow. I know I many times have been in that kind of light where the inspiration is coming. And I know many of those on the screen. I'd love to hear if you feel yourself. But many times we have received many illuminations, and we can relate to the fact that it is almost difficult to try to bring back to your body to capture what is being said. It comes so fast. It's like receiving an entire book in an instant.
I'm glad he can
Kimberly-
read his handwriting.
Kimberly, I was told I had the worst handwriting that a doctor had ever seen. But then when I look at Doc's handwriting here, I'm like, I think he's got me beat.
So Karen, I appreciate this. Let's read Karen before we take our Karen Mahan in the comments before we take our next break. I had an illumination for about 1 minute while giving a massage. I became a column of light and I felt God looking through my eyes. I could never be sick and was not male or female. Wow. Absolutely love that.
Could I just add one thing in on this on that the Russells talk about also? Remember, this is so important, and this I do remember from my beginning readings. Every meditation, because meditation can be a little nebulous, and we all have certain ways to do it, but every meditation is a partial illumination. So it's not to be measured, it's not to be diagnosed, it's not to be, did I go this far, did I go that far? You can get really lost in that, but you just know, right? That's where we don't think it, we don't sense it. We know every meditation is a partial illumination. So I encourage you to try it and just remember and take that to the bank, that every time you do that, you're having a partial illumination.
All right, we have so much more to cover. This is so exciting, and we haven't even gotten into the good stuff yet. Oh my goodness. But I do think it is time for our next break, folks, because this time is going to fly by. I know we're going to go past our 90 minutes already. Let's take 3 minutes, stand up, at least get some oxygen if you can, or sit down and just quietly meditate. We'll see you in 3.
Look at that page number, page 111.
All right, my dear friends, beautiful ones. Those 3 minutes goes by very, very, very quickly. I hope you're enjoying some of the quotes there about every inspiring thought which comes to you as a personal illumination. Treasure your moments. And so as we continue, I'm going to ask John to end up reading the next to the last paragraph on the bottom of page 112 in just a moment. I just want to mention to everybody my sheer joy and excitement in this message, because this is part of what was so exciting for me when I walked in. It brings me to tears. Is when I saw the things that I knew as truth with a capital T when I walked into that museum. And I saw it pictorially depicted in a way that I knew could free humanity from the chains of bondage that we were in. And so for me, it has been a great joy and privilege to be part of the work. And this is part of why we all pour so much love in all of what we're doing here. So I just want to share that excitement, because truly, like, I get so excited I can hardly stand it. And I would say that the rest of our group does as well. Do you not?
Yep. Thank you. That's how I felt when I read this stuff. My heart I just got a huge tears like you did when I read the work. I knew it was true.
That's exactly where it was.
And I've had the pleasure of doing magazine for a long time. So after 15 years and over 80 issues and seeing where other people converge, you know when you see the truth.
John?
Kimberly, if I could add to that, and I'll talk about my brother Ken there. The museum in Waynesboro represents the embodiment of this message. So the home study course, the life of Walter and Leo Russell, are on full display in that museum. And it's just like Ken. At the time, he was a 28-year student. All he could do was read about it. And he never saw the embodiment of the message. And when he walked in, and to see his surprise and how he was overwhelmed with what he had read 28 years ago. So I understand what you're saying, because you're not the only ones that experienced that came into that museum. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And so we'll continue our journey here to try to let people use their imagination what this must be.
And we'll continue to bring as much of the visuals to you as we can. And so, John, if you would, I'm going to, if you'll scroll down up, there's an image right there of the museum right there, the entries of the door. And even if you zoomed in to the center there, you would see just a small smattering of all the artwork there. So someday we'll maybe take you on a visual tour as well. So, John, if we could, I'm going to ask James if you'll pull up on page 112. I would like you to start with a paragraph that said it was necessary to overcome this difficulty, referring to the writing. And then, so right there, keep going right down a little bit more, James. It was necessary to overcome this difficulty. If you'll read those bottom two paragraphs, John.
Yes. It was necessary to overcome this difficulty, for the great reason for keeping me in the light for such a long period was to write down the message of the divine Iliad, as interpreted from the rhythms of God's thinking in the aspired language of light, for the purpose of making mankind at long last know and comprehend God. Also, it was necessary for me to make hundreds of diagrams for chemical and astronomical charts, for the purpose of giving science a new cosmogony in harmony with the laws of nature, to replace the present one which does not conform with natural law.
All right, so wanted to bring up that note, the idea of natural law. When I circled it in purple, I want us to all remember that the home study course is called Universal Law, Natural Science, and Living Philosophy, and it is based on a home study course on the science of man. So I want you to see this natural law and how much they give to this idea of the divinity of nature. And I loved the new cosmogony in harmony with the laws of nature.
Kimberly, I would like to share with our audience another 2 words for natural law, and it's called common sense. Because if it's in nature, then that's the way God planned it to be. Only man is the one that screws it up.
Very true.
And can I add a little bit to that? Not to that, but to what we're reading here on that last part there, is you're reading a man that never studied science. He didn't know any science, and he wrote these astronomical charts, chemical charts, without even knowing what he was doing. He didn't even know the proper terms. He had to go and study academic literature to figure out how to correspond what he had already written down, and proven that it didn't come from some left field. This came from the voice of God through this man. I just find that when you just look at that chart, you just looked at that diagram, that one diagram, which there's thousands of them. And he's saying he wrote all this before he even studied any science book or knew the terms of what he was even looking at. So I just find that very moving, very, very moving.
I would 100% agree with you. And so let me explain to the audience right quick why the Awaken Your Inner Genius is focused on the man who tapped the secrets of the universe and the home study course. So part of what we have found, what had been my experience as well, is that the work of the Walter and Leo Russell is so large that it can sometimes overwhelm people who are brand new. Is that a fair way to say it to some people? We have almost 200 years of students that have been studying this right here. And my vision was is to try to find an easier on-ramp to get people interested. And so we didn't start with the Divine Iliad, although all of us have our own copies of the Divine Iliad. We focused on the man who tapped to make it an easy on-ramp. That's why we created this whole Awaken Your Inner Genius. And we wanted people to get comfortable with the home study course and begin to see that passion and have that. It's not teaching, it's reminding you of what you already know deep inside. And so that was why we pulled together, and we actually have been working on this for many, many months. I mean, we started this idea back in December, and it was so please understand that we're talking about the Divine Iliad because that was the product that came from his 1921 day illumination, his initial product. Is that fair, John?
Yes.
Okay, so let me read this on the top of page 114. And then, Jim, I'm going to come to you to have you comment. But this is what Walter said. Over 40,000 words were thus written and hundreds of charts made with God's mind and thinking being mine, with hardly an erasure or correction. You who have read the books of beauty, love, desire, and healing and other parts of the Divine Iliad surely know that I could not alone write such rhythmic and masterly literature. Nor can any man at any time produce masterly art except while in the ecstasy of working knowingly with God. Wow. Wow. Seems like something needs to be said to that. Anybody on our panel?
You know what? That's what Mozart said. He didn't make a correction.
James, yes. Go ahead, Karen.
No, it's how Mozart said. He said he channeled it. It came straight through. He made no corrections. It was perfect. His time out. So is he the only one who's done it? No, that's how God works when you are in the flow.
Right. Well, and so let's continue. So I'll just read this part as I continue on page 114. During the entire period of severance, I could never attach my body to my mind as a part of myself, self being all capitalized. It always seemed outside of me, unattached, like an instrument which I could use, but was in no way related to my personal being. Leo experienced the same effect during the 3 days of her severance in 1946. When my body felt hunger, it was not I who was hungry. My body automatically picked up food under instinctive control. My body, I'll continue to the next paragraph. My body likewise acted under instinctive control when it felt necessity for air or exercise. It sometimes walked itself to the park, where it knew the way and it would come back unerringly, but it was not I who walked, for I was forever in the high heavens of indescribable ecstasy, forever talking with God in his thought language of light.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Let me share something with people. In my reading throughout my lifetime, you hear different ancient souls, wise souls say that it could be up to a year before the soul enters the body. So I just wanted to bring that up because Leo often said that the body can instinctively exist without being occupied. And just remember that it's just a body, and without you being in it, it only knows the basics of life, and that's it. Survival. So I just wanted to make that point.
I love that. I love that. So I wanted to continue on page 115. It says, I cannot relate anything to time, for time ceased to be. So just let me step out for a moment. This was a 39-day illumination. So it was 39 days that he was going through this. And then I'll continue the paragraph. All I can say is that there came a time after that blinding flash in which I became aware of knowing all things. Somewhere in the Bible, it says something like these words, ye shall have an anointing of the Holy One, and ye shall know all things. Well, I looked it up. That's 1 John 2:20. That's what a good recovered Southern Baptist housewife does. I used to have to repeat these things.
I thought that was some code that you were going to ask me to explain. John 2:20. I'm like, what the hell?
Oh, yeah, for the divine wisdom of John.
I thought that was going to be the last round of golf he shot. John.
So, Ken, I know that you pulled out the next paragraph on page 115. If you could bring out what was important for you in that one.
Yeah, on the face of it, such a statement seems incredible, but it is not. Our concept of knowledge has been built upon the complexity of multitudinous effect instead of the other simplicity of cause of complex effect, which is, and John said it very well. We have 26 letters in the alphabet. How many words can be made up? An infinite amount of them, but it's still only 26 letters. And John has uttered, if you can count from 0 to 9, and you can understand compression, expansion, you now know the secrets of the universe. That's it. There's nothing that goes past that or comes before that. So it's not as complicated. And so therefore, we have to get out of effect and get to cause. Cause is as simple as 3 mirrors in a kaleidoscope, right? You break apart a kaleidoscope when you're a kid and you look in there, there's only 3 mirrors. But what it's reflected is in the other mirrors. It's kind of like, I always relate it to the bathroom mirror, right? When you open up your medicine cabinet and you close it right next to the window, the mirror that might be next to it, and you can see a bunch of images. And then I that's why I got the infinite complexity of like, oh, that's what he's meaning by it's a mirrored universe and it goes on infinite. That's what infinity is, because it's infinite light wave universe, right? Light is, and the light we're talking about is the yellow illuminating light that he refers to in one of the passages from the Divine Iliad, that he's the white light that is the unseeable light, and then talks about the yellow incandescent light, which is the same light we see from the sun, which again is yellow reflective incandescent light. And as John was talking about, each one of those lights have a language within themselves. And so cause is simple to the kaleidoscope, while effect is complex and infinite repetition of few pieces of broken glass reflected within those 3 mirrors. It's kind of like, it goes back to Russell talked about, it's like the first boat, right? It was not invented. It was sensed, right? And you can imagine a caveman, right, at the creek, washing his face, maybe drinking some water, and all of a sudden he sees this big log floating by, and he's thinking, man, if I was on that log, I bet you I'd float down that river, and then I wouldn't have to paddle and walk so fast. There's your first boat. It's a sensed observation. It's not an idea. An idea is always original and has never been here before. It's original from the source, and reproduced. But the reality of it is, we confuse a lot of things as knowledge, or that's a brilliant idea, when it's just a sense observation. Most people in the material world, when they look at success, they know when you say, "Oh, you're brilliant," they're not brilliant. They're just they're sense observers. To a different degree than others. That's what I would call that paragraph.
A lot of wisdom to that, John, and then I would like to comment on that.
I wanted to expand on something that Ken mentioned about the 2 mirrors. I'll never forget, in the business I was in, we would go into these condos and they had masterful, huge bathrooms. And we would go in, and one day, and being a Russell student, it just kind of hit home. So you look into this giant jacuzzi tub, and they had mirrors opposite each other. And I would have people lean in, and I would explain to them what they were seeing. And they were seeing what they termed the infinity effect, Now remember, all light and all motion is curved. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is I wanted people to realize that your thoughts, your thinking, they emanate from you and they will return to you. And when people know this as a fact, they will start thinking differently.
Yes.
Because it will come home eventually. Like I said, there's your timing, my timing, and then there's God's timing. So anyway, I just wanted to say, if people wanted to see that demonstrated, just look at two mirrors side by side and peek in, and you'll see that infinity effect. And you see how light bends.
Well, and that's what is so powerful about this work, is helping us realize that whatever it is we're sending out in the world is going to come back. And so this is not karma per se. This is the natural order of the universe, is what the science is saying. So I'm just making mention of that, John, because I know a lot of people get it confused with this notion of karma. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that this is a scientific notion of how this world is cause and effect. And Ken, I love the way you brought some of that up. I did want to go ahead and go down a paragraph where Walter Russell said, in one timeless flash, this is still on 115, right below where Ken was, in one timeless flash, I knew all things. All that I have ever written since then are but three-dimensional extensions into a universe of time and space. It did take time to think them into form. So just like what Dee was talking about, the books that she's working on for children, she has a flash of inspiration, of illumination, and then it takes time to turn it into a book. And he said, and write them down, but to know all things was timeless. And I wanted to go on to that next paragraph that I have.
Hang on.
No, hon, can you finish
Kimberly.
that sentence, because it illustrates the point we're talking.
Yeah, you got to finish that last sentence. That's critical. Read that.
Oh, finish that sentence. You can't do that.
There's anarchy from the Russell audience. Got it. All of my chemical and astronomical charts were made before I knew the names of the elements or of stellar formations.
See, that is huge. Huge.
Okay. I thought y'all had already said that, but that's okay. I'm going to bring that up. Yes, Karen, go ahead.
When you see his periodic chart, it is a wave. And what you see is the octaves build and build and build, and they compound. And so what you're seeing is the beginning of threes piled up on top of threes, piled up on top of threes. And that makes the periodic table as it scales up. The perfect model is not that one. It's called the SAM, the new model of the atom, which shows how, based on Walter Russell's work and the prisms and the threes, how it actually builds the entire spectrum. And everybody doesn't have to remember that this spectrum is light, color, sound, chemistry, and the crystalline structures are all based on the same thing.
Now, I would like to bring that up for just a moment. I'm going to let everybody know we're going to go past our time already. I can tell you that. But James, bring that back up, because I want everyone to see what was taught to us in science on the left, how everything is put into boxes, okay, and that particular chart. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to comment, because I know you've said that before. And notice what Walter Russell's periodic elements are here on the right. And so just a quick comment about the difference there, because I'm going to bring it up how it ties into what I see happening in systems. Jim? Jim, you're on mute. He's sorry. Because he talks about how the chart on the left, it just wasn't finished.
Right. And it was very kind of him, because he gave, for some reason, I'm blocking the guy's name.
Mendeleev.
What's the chart? Pardon
Mendeleev.
Yeah, got it. He gave Mendeleev full credit for what he had accomplished, because it was an inspiring thing that he manifested from source. But he only manifested to the ability he had to do so. So what Russell gave us was, I'm trying to simplify this without getting, I mentioned it before. On this chart, the first element that shows up is hydrogen. Russell shows in the 9-octave wave that there are 21 elements preceding hydrogen that man has not yet discovered, and still hasn't, although now they're starting to look. He also made corrections and added 3 other elements to the Mendeleev chart. So what he did was he completed the Mendeleev chart and gave him full credit for it. And he also showed us that that the universal chart is wave and cube.
Yes.
Remember
Yes.
what John said, there's only two things in the universe that are perfect, the cube and the sphere. Everything else is building to and from these. So that's what he did. Mendeleev gave us the sphere. He explained the sphere. He gave us the theory that the universe was dying and winding down. Russell gave us the understanding that it's not dying and winding down. It's winding up as it winds down and winding down as it winds up.
All right, so I'd like to add something because my expertise is in a discipline called systems thinking. And what I notice on the left is something that I notice a lot of people in organizations, keep in mind now, I've worked with leaders in 33 countries and 24 industries. Most people see the world in boxes and very, very linear. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. The world is not linear. It is circular. It is in constant motion. It is dynamic and living and breathing consciousness at all times. And so this is part of what I think is very powerful about looking at these two on the screen here. So can I go to that next? I appreciate you all stopping me. Can I go to that next paragraph on page 115? Because I wanted to go into the definition of illumination. It says illumination into the light means just that, for it is the light of all knowing, or the light of love, which is manifested by thinking God's all knowing into complexities or patterned form. And so we're bringing this up because I personally believe in the awakening of humanity that we're going to have a lot of people that begin to have many more flashes of illumination, of understanding what is coming through. And that is what I personally, I came to John when those first few months when I was studying the home study course. And I was saying, John, I think this could be so powerful in helping to demystify what I think is happening and unfolding here in humanity. John, do you remember those conversations I had with you?
I do. That's why we're sitting here.
That's why we're sitting here. And so just because of time, I'm going to move us along to, I do want to ask Ken.
Can I just say one more thing about
Please.
idea? All idea comes in a timeless flash.
Amen to that, brother.
That's
all
it.
idea comes in a timeless flash. We'll actually jot that down and James will cap
Your
that
idea
up.
always comes in a timeless flash.
Timeless flash. And so I wanted to tie this into the universal heartbeat. Before I go there, though, I'm going to ask Ken if he'll comment just briefly because we're on time. We have time issues here. But on the top of page 116, you are in particular passionate about what Walter wrote here about that line at the top of page 116. So do you want to read the last line on 115 and go through 116 and talk a little bit about the three omnis?
Sure. This is where I got my secret weapon. Okay. I instantly and timelessly, and there again, knew the still undivided divine light of God, which is the fulcrum of life and power. Also, I knew the heartbeat of the divided light wave universe, which manifests love, life, and power in matter. And I also knew that mind and soul and God were one. The one invisible, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent creator of all things in all this universe of mind, which God is. And that's why we are all great sons and daughters of the Most High. We are all God. When we know we are God and when we walk as one with God, that doesn't mean you put a label on and say, I'm God, because when you have that connection, you would never humility always comes with that knowing. So in terms of that, for me, though, it was the 3 stages of how I got to really have my personal relationship that's on this podcast with me right now, guiding words, helping me to listen, and helping me to translate things I might want to translate. And it was first to experience omnipresence, which I call nature. Omniscience is all intelligence, and omnipotence is a combination of all presence and all knowledge combined. To me, it gives you omnipotent abilities to create that which you've always wanted to create or that which you care to create. And that is an indicator of omnipotence. I believe also for me, that is how I got to have my relationship with my creator. I started in nature, and then I started after spending enough time in nature, I felt that connection. I didn't feel separate anymore. started contemplating what created nature. What's the idea behind a tree? As Jim talked about, the tree gives carbon dioxide. It gives oxygen, and we give carbon dioxide. So there's that circle that we're just got done talking about, the circle of life, right? There is nothing wasted. Everything given is always re-given. Tree gives oxygen, and we give it back hydrogen, carbon dioxide. So there's always that interchange with everything in the universe that we live in. So for me, those omnis were really important in the stages of getting that personal relationship that we all must find, I believe, within ourselves, as we are indicated in the home study course teaches us. We must find God within. It's not without, it's not on a tile up on the roof. Oh Lord, be with me now. I always look up and like, what tile is God on? Because I got to get up on that roof because I want to be with God. But, and that's why this home study course always says it's within, not without.
I can see what Ken was saying as he was looking up to that tile. He was like saying, God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Yeah. With the donkey that I had 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago.
All right. So here we are. It's always so difficult to facilitate this, and an honor to who is with us on the audience here and future conversations, and to the panel, and mostly to what we're trying to do for the divine and honor Walter and Leo. That's always the balance that I'm walking. So there is so much more to say. I want to just be really, really clear. There's so much more to say. But so I'm going to encourage you to get ready to have your questions, because I have seen the gift that Karen has prepared for you this evening, the visual journey. So what we do, for those of you that are new, that at the end of the actual program, which we're running 7 minutes behind, but that is okay. I was being told just to keep it going. You're talking to people here who could talk about these things all night long. Is that fair, my friends?
Yes.
We literally could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. You will just see the joy. We hope you feel that.
We do.
As you watch this visual journey, remember that we're going to be showing you these pieces of the visual journey all throughout the month for Unit 2. Enjoy. Simply allow it to wash over you. It will be on the YouTube channel, and you're going to begin to see in motion some of the things that we just talked about. You are in for a treat for our routine, our Russell panel of folks. I'm sure you're going to have some suggestions for changes. Please make a note as we go along so we can make updates. This is an organic, dynamic experience that we are all having together. James, let's roll the visual journey, and at the same time taking a little bit of our break. Okay, so Jim, what did you think?
I think it's beautiful. I love her work.
So what's interesting about all of this is, so Karen is familiar with Russell work and has been for a Russell student in some degrees for the past 13 to 15 years. This is the first time that she's read the full home study course. So she is going through it new, as some of you are also going through the course. So what was so lovely about bringing Karen into the fold, and I'll ask Ken to comment on it in just a minute, was that I wanted that divine feminine perspective of the work. I love Karen. I believe she's a conceptual genius. Good. She's here to hear what I say about her. I believe that she's a conceptual genius in the way that she brings things to motion from what she sees. She has been so willing to, whatever the seasoned Russell students say, oh, we need to change this, we need to update this. She's been very, very willing to do that because she has an earnest heart and trying to make sure this work is represented in the true source that it is. Is that fair, Karen? Karen, can you hear me? Boy, we have, okay. Karen,
I think I'm having issues with my sound.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And Ken, just a quick response to what you saw. To me, it was a beautiful rendition, and this was just based on Walter's Illumination. We have not put together what we did the past 2 weeks with this as well.
I thought it was great. There was only one thing I would give feedback on, and it was in the beginning, and I couldn't quite remember what it was. I'd have to see it again, but minor, but God Almighty, the wave was beautiful. I thought the octave wave was really powerful, and just most of it, I was captivated. I'm going to go back and watch it again myself because there was just so many layers of beautiful work there done, Karen. I was definitely just wow. I had a hard time reading. I was so overwhelmed with the images.
It is. And that's always the challenge for these things. John had a little bit of technology challenge. And so what we're doing each time is please understand, John, can you speak? Can you hear me? No. So Jim, if you'll speak for us here. One of the things that I know, John was very proud of taking part of helping you, both of you were part of this idea of having a third special edition that actually colorized the photos, because there was actually, Leo had expressed an interest of saying she would have loved to have had color photos.
Yes, she did. And John was paramount in making that happen.
Yes.
And the upgrade was approved by her and overdue. And they didn't change a word. The words are as they were written. Yes. They simply colorized the pictures.
Well, and so as I've gone through the archives, Jim, I was just in there this weekend, and their version of cut and paste is they would actually hand type a letter, a page. They would cut sections of the pages and they would glue and tape them together, and that's how they made their scripts. So they didn't have all of the tools that we have today. I can't help but think
this was the early 1950s. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I can't help but think that Leo would have a lot of fun with someone like a student like Karen that's actually doing some of these things of saying, oh, yes, oh, no. Don't you think?
Yes.
Yep. I think so.
So
keep in mind here real briefly, I promise I'll be brief. When you're going through the course and you see a lot of the pictures, they were pictures that were taken by a camera while Dr. Russell actually drew them on chalkboard while he was giving lessons.
I didn't realize that. So some of these weren't even posters that he had. He was drawing out the concept.
If he was giving a lesson, he would draw that out on the board in chalk.
Wow, that's powerful. All right, so officially we're entering into our Q&A section, and so we're going to ask everybody, if you would, please put a few things in the Q&A. What do you have questions about what we've talked about either today or in our past few lessons? If you have a question of any of us as individuals, feel free to do that as well. I have a couple of interesting things that I'll be sharing with you at the end of our session here, but I wanted to see if any of our folks have it. In the meantime, do any of our panelists have any questions that you'd like to ask each other while we're waiting for the Q&A to come through?
John, when you grip the golf club, is your right hand going towards the V, going towards your shoulder, or is it going towards more towards
I don't even think he can hear you. We're still having technical difficulties.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up.
That's okay. That's okay.
Hey,
So any questions that we have of each other while we're waiting for any Q&A in the comments?
I'll tell them I will slow down the pace of the thing for that, but I know it has to be fast for you guys, so I will slow it down for John to reload.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, it was engulfing. That was just wonderful, Karen. I don't know if you heard me, but I
was having all kinds of difficulties. I couldn't see here, but since I did it, so I know what it is. So, but we'll put, you know what? We'll do the box and the circle and the prism mirrors for next week.
Okay. Cool. So this is an iterative process. So Rita says, from the slides, what does this phrase mean? Tunnel, bridge, compresses light, gates of light. Who would like to dive into that one?
From
which
slide?
She was just mentioning one of the slides. Rita, pretty impressed that you must have caught that right off front. She was just talking about kind of on the compression light or gates of light.
What, from Karen's slides?
That was from Karen's slides.
Thank you.
I can respond to that. If you think of the Walter Russell's periodic table, and you look at the ones that are colorized, you will see that every curve has all the colors, and then every next curve has all the colors. So what you're doing is you're going through a compressed tunnel. Imagine your eye picks up light, but it puts it into a prism. So it's still a V shape coming into your eye like a tunnel, and it's compressing as it comes in. So imagine it's 1 octave thick. So it's a compressed tunnel of light, no different than how he went and visited God. That would be my take on that. Gentlemen?
I like that.
Works for me. Yeah.
Karen,
that's kind of what I was talking about, where everything we take in the world around us. I mean, just around John's and your own home, you realize that's all just light compressing into exactly what Karen was talking about, into a tunnel into your eye. It's shrinking down into this point.
Yeah. And that's actually how time works as well. It comes back when we compress the particles into a condensed crystallized matter. We have to give it breath and spirit. And then as we degenerate, we come back out and we get kind of looser every which way.
I want to say something about that. The time thing is, remember, God doesn't know time. Time is a man concept. It is not a God concept.
No,
time is the purpose of measuring matter. What I've read from what I've read, I'm not rebuttaling what you're saying. I'm just adding to it to say that you're right in the terms of time, because it allows us to measure things, but it is only for the purpose of measuring matter.
Well, you think about it, it also gives you an opportunity to think about the thoughts and how you thought, what your thoughts create. So your world is created by your thoughts and the things that are around you. So by being crystalline form, it's a slowed down version, like a slow motion version of your thinking. So if you don't like what you had, it always reinvites you to rethink, because you are projecting, literally like a projector, your persona, your waves, your vibration into the ether.
Countenance is what we call it. Countenance are always projecting. Right on. I dig that. And that's why, again, matter, right? We're talking about thoughts are, just like Jim said, every thought has a body, as Walter Russell and Leo Russell talk about. Every thought. So as Kim was illustrating, that when I do the I am, I have to be careful that, like, my body's tired. I'm not tired. And that's what Walter, I learned that from the home study course. It's not me. I never fatigue, because we are energy. We are not our body. So our body's tired. And I've learned in my distinguishment of times to always try and make sure that I say, my body's tired. This body needs rest. My body is hungry. I am not hungry. My body is hungry. And
think about this, Ken. Think about this also, that when I know that when God wants to slow me down so he can talk to me, it's like he makes me tired. So I finally shut up, shut down, get off the computer so that it can say, okay, now can we have a conversation? It took me a while to understand. When he tires me, it's like, okay, I'll go lay down. You want to have a conversation? I got it. So it's a funny thing.
So let me jump in there. So something I've really learned that humanity isn't very good at understanding this is that our physicality has to match. Our spirituality can only grow at the rate that our physicality can match it. So this is Kimberly Faith's personal understanding, and especially studying some of the science and what I came to the work intuitively knowing. And this is part of why so many of us right now in the grand awakening of humanity are being encouraged to eat well, to drink water, to eat more fresh green foods, to eat foods of the light, to move our bodies. It is because we are advancing in our levels of spirituality and our understanding and our physicality. We just read this about what Walter said, is that literally, and what John was saying, it was difficult to even come back to this reality. So for anyone who is listening to this at any time, please understand that our spirituality and our physicality are like this balance beam, okay? Are like the seesaw that we need to be able to keep in balance. So, and Jim, I know you have a deep understanding of this. This has been my experience, that I literally have been encouraged in my flashes of inspiration and illumination to make sure that my body, my physical vessel, can handle the advanced level of knowledge that is coming through me.
Okay, there's another
Absolutely.
A good example, like love is timeless. And my love for you, Kimberly, is timeless. Love, balance, rhythm, truth are all timeless commodities you can know, but you cannot see. Love, beauty, rhythm, balance, and truth. You can know them, but you cannot see them.
Our love for you is timeless too.
Somebody,
I love you too, Jim.
I'm gonna, you guys, everybody in your relationship, you have moments of chaos. So we have a question.
Sure, we do.
Chaos. So let me go
Only
back.
when she disagrees with me. Only when she disagrees with me, Karen. That's the only time we have for.
We all have those problems. So here's the question: when it comes to chaos, I want you to think of the periodic table and how things go this way. So you've got even and odd and even and odd. So one is a cohesive body, one is an uncohesive body, and it's asking. It has it doesn't have it's unequilibrium. So what you're doing is it's asking you to go back. But in order for you to change, you can't stay in the same state. So it's taking you out of state to bring you back into another rhythm. So it's always growing you, but you still have to build and change.
Okay, so I want to bring something up to the group. Anybody who's listening right now is, I know that these concepts can get pretty big pretty fast.
Yeah.
All right. So I've hung out with these folks and they can go from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. When I first started coming to the museum, I would drive 6 hours every single month for 1 week a month to spend time. And it was like drinking out of a fire hose. So I was working with John and some of the others to say, could you please just give me a little straw of knowledge, so I'm not like trying to drink from Niagara Falls. All right. So
John Bonzo just said, is it bedtime yet?
We're almost there, John. We're almost there. You know, he can't talk right now because of technology, and there's so many things I could say about that. But while
God doing for us what we can never do for ourselves.
So I want to bring up something really, really important to the group, and then I'm going to have Karen had asked us to have Ken explain the three omnis, which I'm going to have him be thinking about how to do that concisely. But I am going to ask James to please bring up page 121 of the home study course, because this is something really important, especially for those of you that have never heard of the Russells before. So when we go here to the bottom of 120, on top of 121, I'm going to go ahead and start reading it while we're pulling that up. It says, unfortunately for the progress of science, man is peering into effect to seek the cause of the effect. And he goes on to talk a little bit more. And he says, unfortunately also for science, it is unsensed conclusions that are so utterly convincing that the true concept as visioned by a consummate illuminate. It's right there on 121. Keep going, James. So let me let him, okay, right there. All right, so consummate illuminate, whom the world knows only once in thousands of years as deemed worthless, instead of realizing the infinitely priceless value of such a visitor to the human race, he is calculatingly suppressed, lest the beloved traditions born from sensed conclusions be destroyed. They cannot be destroyed, however, for the day will come, even though it may be 1,000 years from now, that the revelations which shall be given to man by Leo and me in the course of this study will make a new world based upon its cosmic truths. These revelations will live in you, capital Y-O-U, who will know them, and through you, the world will someday know what you shall know. And so I wanted to bring up something that I ran across in the archives this week, and as we get ready to have these final comments, because a lot of people are waking up to the reality that things aren't exactly as what we deem them to be, as in humanity. And part of what has impressed me so much about Walter and Leo was their deep desire to really change the way humanity worked. And so the number one question, Jim, that people have when they first hear of the Russells is what? Why haven't I heard about them?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And that's because it's, even though the message has been on the planet now for over 100 years and in written form through the books and the course since the 50s, it hasn't gotten out to mankind, because mankind, even though there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands around the world waking up and finding it, there's hundreds of thousands more, maybe millions, that have not found it yet. But what is rapidly changing is their desire to know these answers.
Yes.
And that is huge, because when I was a young man in my lifetime, the desire to know this was a rare thing. Anybody that's been a student for any length of time can tell you, to sit down and talk to someone you meet about this information, it was nearly impossible.
Right.
Now you can listen to what they say or make a statement, and they have this desire to want to know more, and you can take them to this material. So there is a massive change going on.
So, well, this is why I wanted to bring up this letter. So I just want to read you a few elements. This was November 29th, my birthday, by the way, 1958. And they wrote a letter to a local editor of a small paper, and they said, "Are our towns poisoning their residents?" So it says, "We are becoming gravely concerned by the increasing number of unexplainable deaths of young and middle-aged people who die suddenly in their chairs or in their cars, as you noted in today's issue. In most instances, these unexplainable deaths from causes entirely unrelated to disease are stated to be from natural causes." And so they go on to describe that there are no natural causes. And so listen to this next sentence. This is really going to ring home for many of you. "We have strong reason to believe that fluorine and chlorine in drinking water are the direct causes. Fluorine gas is the most dreaded gas of the laboratories. Both of these gases are oxygen destroyers." They tend to go on for the next paragraph explaining how the human heart takes oxygen, how fluorine gets in the way, and how people are dying from fluorine. And they said, this is what is happening to all Americans drinking poisoned waters, which our cities and towns are forcing the people to drink. And they go on to trying to give them awareness. And so I wanted to bring that up because there are more and more people waking up to these truths. And Jim, I'm not sure if you had seen that. John, can you talk yet?
Yes.
No, but
You mean I was hoping for silence? Like, oh, I'm just kidding.
man, I was going to bring up his Omni Hotel. Wait a minute, I got to just say this before you talk. He says, John says, "I stay at Omni hotels when I travel. Therefore, I'm all knowing, all present, and all powerful."
So, well, we're going to talk about the three Omnis in just a moment, but I'm going to ask Jim and John just to mention something. I share this because many people in humanity are now willing to wake up to some of these facts, whereas they would not have understood this back then. And so, Jim, I'm just curious about your reaction to that letter. I was always they were trying to change the world.
It was very timely and very well stated. I haven't read the letter myself, but what I just got from you. Now, today, we know it's almost across the board. People understanding that the effects of fluoride in water and toothpaste and other things is devastating to the human body. And if that wasn't enough, in addition to the damage it can do to the human body through illness and early death, it calcifies the pituitary. I mean, the
peanut.
Not the
Pineal.
Calcifies the pineal gland, which is our direct communion with God. That's the upper room. That's the divine us. So now some people, and I'm one of them, might tend to think that this was done deliberately to us because they wanted to slow down the awakening as we move into the new age. So the pineal is that seat in the body, and the calcification of the pineal gland is making it difficult for people to commune with source. It can be very frustrating. And I think that this has pretty much been proven now. Yes, that's the way.
And the reason I'm bringing this up, Jim, is because they were speaking about things that the powers to be did not want us to know. So there was a reason why much of their work, I believe, wasn't brought, that many did not know about it. Is that fair?
Well,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry.
There were definitely attempts to silence them. They had many threats throughout the years. But when you have the knowledge that they have and understand the universality of the soul that you are, threats against body and money they're just irrelevant. You just go on with the mission that you were given.
I would love to hear what John has to say about that.
John, you want to chime in before we wrap up here?
I'm just thankful that the message has survived to this point, and that we can have an opportunity to share it with the world, because there was a time that it could have disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now in its renaissance and its rebirth, and I'm glad to be part of this.
All right. So as we're coming down to the end of the time, and folks, please leave comments in the chat box, even far after when you're listening to this video. I want to go back to one of the questions that we had from Karen. Karen, and the question. Okay. She asked that she wanted to know more about this conversation around the omnis. And so I'm going to throw that to Ken as he begins to wrap us up here. And I'm going to ask James to pull up that image that I had about the three omnis. And if you would, she just asked for that quick definition, Ken, of what does it mean, omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent.
I actually use the ocean for the best way that I believe is worth describing it, and that we all can relate to, looking out at the ocean and the horizon, the endless horizon, and let alone a beautiful sunset. But when we look at that ocean, you know, the nature of just that ocean, the omnipresence, it's everywhere all the time. So that's a real easy way to just look at the surface of the ocean and really feel and connect to omnipresence. And then if you think what's below the ocean level, and you think of all that life form, the seaweed, the kelp, the fish, all the life that we don't even know about, we want to explore 5% of the ocean, you realize that what intelligence created all that life that we don't even know, we only 95% of we don't even know about. And you start to get in touch with omniscience, that's the intelligence that created it, conceptualized it, and then manifested it. And then you think of a tsunami or a tidal wave, and you can see the omnipotence of the ocean. So within the ocean, I believe that we have the three omnis are really easy to see for each and every one of us, no matter who you are, as you can see those levels at the top, and then you go below, and then you think of that giant tidal wave coming up over you, and you really can connect to those three omnis. I believe that way.
All right, so well said. And in fact, what we would encourage you to do is, if you want to take a screenshot of this, I pulled up this from one of Ken's presentations because he talks about the three omnis quite a bit. He's quite proficient at this. And ask yourself, your divine creator inside, go into meditation and see what more there is to learn about the three omnis with you. And so as we wrap up here, I do want to mention a couple of upcoming events. So Ken will be speaking at an event this coming Saturday, as a matter of fact. So you'll see the image there on the screen. You can certainly get the QR code. You can find it at the philosophy.org website. He'll be speaking this Saturday from 11 to 12:30. It will be live streamed. And his focus, Ken, you want to just give them a quick snapshot?
No, but you can.
He will be speaking about addiction, the law of balance, an antidote to addictionism. And when he's speaking of addictionism, it's not just drugs or alcohol. It's also the addiction of whether it's gambling or whether it's pornography, whether it's addiction to social media, anything that is out of balance in your life. So for those of you that want to tune in, you'll want to hear more from Ken. I will be speaking in August, and so that will be coming up. We'll tell you more about that later. I've certainly changed a lot. I need to get new photos because I'm growing my hair out and I'm red now instead of blonde. But we'll be talking about cosmic romance, and I'll be sharing more about that later. And Karen and I will be speaking at Tesla Tech. Also live stream, Karen, if you want to mention something about that.
The live stream will be going up in about a day on teslatech.live, and it's 28 speakers. It's everything that's a little bit, I will say, based on natural law that you won't normally hear most other places. And if you want to come and be in social and have fun with us, I mean, I have half of the speakers coming from Science is Age magazine that have been my favorite over the last 15 years. So it's a real treat.
All right. So next week, please come back and prepare to join us again. This time, we're going to be talking about Leo's illumination. And John, if you could give them just a teaser, what do you want to say to entice them to come back and be with us for next week?
Well, if you'll look at what Dr. Russell had to do and the number of illuminations and the intensity of his illuminations to be able to even meet Leo Russell. So we'll tie that in for our guest next week.
Okay. Very, very powerful. And so we want to say a gracious thank you to everyone. First of all, I want to thank the panel. So if you all will just join me, this is a lot of work and a lot of dedication for them to do what they do every single week. So a big, big thank you for all of you. And we, as the panel, would like to thank all of you for joining in, both now and in the future. We have over 220, almost over 228 subscribers now. This is a gift of love. We want to say a gracious thank you to you all. And so see what the divine reveals to you. And do remember that this is all about awakening your inner genius. This is your journey. And Walter and Leo Russell captured so much of what they did lovingly so that we would have a path to light the way. Any comments from the panel as we say goodbye to everyone?
I'm bummed I'm not playing golf this week.
All right. Well, there you go. Everyone have a great time and many blessings. We'll see you next Sunday.